Welcome back to another episode of the Open Book Podcast. I have the honor and pleasure of bringing on one of my mentors, someone who has left her mark around our nation in leadership. She is the CEO and founder of the Joyful Excellent Education Group. I want to introduce you to Dr. Wanda Legrand. How are you, friend?
I am so good. I am so excited to be on your podcast. So happy to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. You've got a story to tell, and I want to create this space without feeling like we're scripted. I want us to have a conversation, almost like a mentor conversation, if we can. I want you to, okay. I want to take you on a journey, and my hope is that the listeners, my listeners, will get to meet who I believe to be one of the exemplars of what leadership looks like, both in academic excellence, but also in deep relational excellence. When I first encountered you, you had come to the high school that I was serving as an assistant leader, and you were bringing a leader in, and you brought all this joy. And I feel like we just kind of stared at you like, this is the deputy superintendent of the district that we're serving in. And, when you start as a teacher and you move into leadership and you get to see the superintendent, they kind of feel untouchable, but you felt accessible to me. And I appreciate that. And now you're mentoring leaders from all over the country. Um, I would love it if you just give us an insight onto your journey. So, how did you get to this place? Where did you start? What brings you joy in the work that you do? All the things that you're doing now to continue the work of helping leaders grow.
Happy to share that. I've started out as a high school math teacher, so I'll go way back then. Started out as a high school math teacher. Absolutely love teaching high school math because most students hated math. You'll ask folks now, "What's your favorite subject?" Or what's your least favorite subject? Math is never the favorite. It's typically the least favorite. And so I enjoyed helping making math fun for students and accessible for all students. So my love of education started then. And then my path from there was traditional. I was an assistant principal of a high school. It's been so long. I started out in January 1990. So then I was an assistant principal of a high school and then a principal of a middle school and then principal of two high schools. The first one had about 1,600 students. The other had about 2,300. And then I became the executive director for leadership and professional development because I really had a passion for growing people, helping them to be better. And from there, took a little dip to go to American Express. They wanted me to lead training for them. So I led training for the U.S. and Asia for American Express. And then I missed public ed and after about 2 years. And I said, I need to go back. I need to go back. And so I came back in just those regular traditional roles as well, executive director for high school curriculum, executive director for a region of schools, a regional superintendent, and deputy chancellor in DC. So the deputy superintendent was here in Indianapolis, thoroughly loved it, did not like the weather in Indy. I needed 4 equal seasons. And then I became deputy chancellor in DC public schools, and I retired back home in North Carolina. And when I retired, God shared with me that he wanted me to support Black women educational leaders to avoid some of the painful things I experienced on my journey. So I share that I like to give them the cheat code. I like to help them to see ways to do things differently so they don't have to learn the hard way.
So, talk about that, please. You've created this vehicle that gives you many opportunities to do just that, to continue supporting leaders who need a mentor, who need a thought partner. What was it that said that work was necessary, and what says now? What says now about the work needing to happen right now in this landscape?
Back then, I think originally I retired after 30 years in 2020, which of course was COVID. It was just an interesting time that it was my 30th year and it was COVID. but I retired to help another company get their work off the ground. And a friend of mine said, you should also do the work of supporting leaders. Like we go to dinner, we have a brunch every single month. I couldn't work without this. I think you should do it for more people. I said, wow, that is what God's been saying too. And so, me working with her once a month, just being her thought partner, I wanted to take that to the next level. And so, I get a chance to work with people who are either principals to the deputies or the superintendents, who are black women, to help them to see the work differently, to still achieve excellence, because no one wants to not have excellent results for our students, but also have a life and have joy. And not, as I say, don't hold joy hostage to the weekend or hold it hostage to a vacation, but have joy every day and be intentional about it every day.
You got to help me with that. You got to help me with that. I've served as principal. What I found in that sometimes we get so deep into the work that we forget to have that level of joy. What does that look like? What does that look like?
It's so true. You get so deep because most people who are in the work are in it because they want students and families to be successful. And then you're so immersed. You don't eat breakfast. You don't exercise. You barely have time for your Christian time to pray. You have no routines to sustain yourself. And so it looks like being very intentional with your day and not getting caught up in the wave. So you are there to serve, but you serve your best when you've taken care of yourself. And so typically with leaders that I work with, we start with just the basics of how do you start your day? And so what are your routines in the morning? Because oftentimes getting up early might be the only time you have to yourself. So if you want to get up before your children get up before you go to work, what do you do for 10 or 15 minutes just for yourself to have a solid foundation for your day? And then how do you structure your whole day so that your needs are also incorporated with all the other things you have to do? And then how do you structure your entire week so the same is true? But you have to be intentional. If not, there will always be a crisis. You can't just say, oh, when I get time, I'll take care of myself. There will never be free time, except on vacation, maybe.
There's so many narratives. What I've learned, maybe you could speak to this too. There are movies, there are all these narratives about education, period, right? And there are these perspectives of what it is to be a leader. I get the privilege of serving educational master's students at Butler University. They spend 2 years and they want to become school principals. And I go, "Are you sure you want to be a principal?" And they say, "Yeah, they do. They do." What have you found um, to be the greatest barriers for school leaders to create the environments for their faculty and staff where joy can live there too for them? And what have you seen as the greatest benefits? What is a leader who is embracing joyfulness and leader? How is that impacting those whom they serve to? So that's a two-part question. Barriers, and then what are you seeing as a positive impact also?
The barriers I've seen, the most common one is the thoughtful planning to create that environment. And so the thoughtful planning is more than just your school improvement plan. So, like every state, every charter has a school improvement plan that you have to create. And if you have the freedom, you should also create in within that plan the culture that you want to have in the building, which sets the tone for staff and students. So sometimes if you mention culture, educators automatically think about student discipline and the code of conduct. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the feel, the vibe, the intentional things you do to create the positive culture for the adults and the students. And so many leaders do thoughtful plan, or they do planning, and then some do thoughtful planning, but the thoughtful planning doesn't include everything that creates that kind of environment. So if you have not just rewards and encouragement and those activities for students, what do you have that's thoughtful for the adults? What do you also, as a leader, what do you model every day that's about joy? And when you do create that kind of environment and that vibe in the building, you will see the positive results because people, one, will want to be there. So your staff retention will be higher. Students will want to come because, it's cool to be at Dinkins High School. Oh, this is a great place. And teachers won't want to just leave because if I'm going to work, I want to work here. Why would I want to be somewhere else? But you will see those positive results. And if people feel good, then they do their best work. So students are doing their best work, adults are doing their best work. But the thoughtful planning has to be in place where you created these systems so that can occur. And what I've noticed throughout the years is that most leadership stress comes from adults carrying too much, like they're doing every single thing. They're deciding too often. They make every single decision, and they don't have systems. So your stress comes, I've noticed, from those three things. You're carrying too much, you're deciding too often, and you don't have systems in place. So you're always starting over. You're always stretched so thin because of that.
We talked a little bit offline about I say all the time, I say the principalship is the most isolated position in schools. So sometimes we find ourselves working in isolation. You're helping us to find our joy in the work, to create systems and plans that allow us to do intentional work in culture creation. You also mentor central office leaders. So talk about, and there may be a central office leader who's listening. So where have you seen the greatest relationship between central office leadership and supporting that school leader? What are some of the gems that you provide to central office leaders to make sure, and even the work that you're doing in helping the leaders in buildings create sustainability and actually make sure that it's actually turning into the culture that they hope for?
So the central office leadership work that I do is probably the most interesting in that central office leaders very rarely even have a mentor. So they leave. I remember I didn't have one. And the first thing that was so shocking in my first month in central office was that the building was so quiet. So I go from a high school of 2,300 students to the central office, and I'm just used to, the hustle and bustle of a high school. But I didn't have a mentor. So what I've learned and seen is that central office leaders sometimes feel as if they're just winging it every single day, especially their first year. So it's very difficult for them to have a major impact without some grounding. What I've seen to be very helpful is if they have a leader who helps to ground them in the work, gives them a focus in their role to be successful, to highly impact schools, then they're more successful at their job. But most central office leaders are just trying to figure it out the first year, which is such a sad thing for them. And they can be harshly judged and then let go because they weren't meeting the mark. But the marks aren't always clear for them in central office. So as a principal, pretty clear. You want student achievement, graduation rate, you want a great culture and climate. But for central office, sometimes it's pretty gray, but then they're judged by this gray rubric. So that's harder for them.
You are blowing my mind. We don't know what we don't know until we know, right? I heard a brilliant professor say not long ago. He said the principal didn't get to decide if they're a good principal or not. The people who they serve decide. Um, Same is true of I imagine of central office. They don't get to determine if they're good or not. It's the principals who benefit from their leadership. But what you just communicated to me was something that I've never heard before. So I remember being a first year principal and not knowing what I'm doing, right? And I say all the time, you could be an assistant principal for 20 years. When you move into the principalship, it's a totally different experience. Yes, accountability, all the things. And now what you're communicating is the same can be true of central office. I think we think that central office folk have it all together. They should understand all the things, right? And I've heard principals even communicate their animosity or anger towards central office leaders because they don't feel like they're supported the way that they think they should. But what I'm hearing you say is they're on a journey themselves and they're trying to figure out how to do this work and support principals as well. Is so what is the determining factor between a central office leader? Because I've heard some principals say, I have an amazing assistant superintendent and they do all the things. What is the difference between, is it skill? Is it mindset? Is it systems, the work that you do? What are the determining characteristics or personalities or core values that distinguish between a great principal supervisor versus one that may not know how to do that in an effective way?
That's a great question. I think it's set by the leaders in the central office. So whether you're the deputy superintendent, the assistant superintendent, that you establish the culture of service. And so I was one of the ones as a principal that often complained about central office because I did not find them. And I wrote recently on LinkedIn, I didn't find the support to be supportive of me. Because back in the day, and sometimes probably now too, people were given jobs in central office and they thought they had arrived, but they didn't arrive to a place to serve a school. But they arrived because they'd been a good principal or they served their time, that they had this elevated position, but their posture wasn't to serve schools. And that would irritate me. So if you're not here to serve schools, then why are you in my building? So I don't need you to be here. So it's all about the culture that you set in the central office, and that should be in service of the schools where the rubber meets the road. That's where the students are.
I want you to say that again. I want you to say that again. Well, all of it, because what it sounds like, and I think I heard Simon Sinek say this. He says sometimes we promote assistant principals to principals because they were really good assistant principals. Doesn't mean they were going to be good principals. We do the same thing with central office. Oh, you were an amazing principal. You did 20 years. Now, as a natural next step is moving you to central office, but doesn't necessarily mean you know how to. So where's the accountability then? So do we just figure that out the hard way when you move into the role and somebody goes, you don't know what you're doing? And you go, nobody told me what I was supposed to do.
Your support is not supportive. So my friends, they joke with me. That's my saying. I love to say that. When people, I remember coming, it was actually here in Indianapolis. We were somewhere with the principal. Actually, we were at IDOE, and there was a room of people that were supporting the principal, and they were outsiders. And I said, and we were leaving, I said, is that supportive? He said, absolutely not. I said, well, there's so many. He said, I know, and not one of them are helpful. Which hurt my heart so much. But I've seen it happen, not just here, but with IDOE back in the day. But I've seen it happen in so many places that you don't. The best posture for supporting a school is like being a coach. And you can go back and forth from being the coach with those probing questions to be the consultant where you give answers and you guide them to the answers. But the best, I think, school supervisor is a combination of a coach and a consultant. And they themselves have very clear, focused goals, which all revolve around the school and the principal being successful. But that has to be direction from the central office.
I love it. I'm going to be like you when I grow up. Um, I every keynote, every training, every coaching session, I try to frame schools that are excelling are considering three things: mindset of everybody who's serving, from the principal to parents, skills necessary to do the work that's in front of them, and then systems. How do we monitor and investigate mindset? How do we know where people are skill wise and what systems are in place to help them build that skill? When I took my EQ and my doctorate program, I had no clue that I lacked relational awareness or relationship management skills. And we think those things come naturally, but they don't. It is a skill that has to be developed. But in all my schooling, I never took a course on building relationships. And what I learned the hard way was getting access to other humans in a way that allows you to support them requires trust and emotional and psychological safety. And so, if those things are not in place, if I don't know that I lack those skills, How do I build the skill? What is my mindset? Am I in this role because I want to tell people what to do? Or am I in their role so that I can serve other people authentically and wash their feet? I use the example all the time. I say, if you want to be a leader, you got to be prepared to wash their feet. And they go, wash their feet? Well, you have to serve them. You have to support them. You don't get to take credit for anything. You take responsibility for everything and make sure everybody has what they need to be successful. But we don't always learn that. And there are significant implications for when we don't do that well. Um, Speak to a leader, one who needs hope, one that is tired from the work, they've lost joy. Speak to their heart. What should they be thinking about right now? What should they be prioritizing? What should they be remembering about the role? Just speak to their hearts.
So timely, given that it's February, as most districts approach the testing season where everyone's a little more stressed than others. I would, to that leader, share with them that to find what initially brought them to the work, go into that classroom, because most buildings, if you are a principal or if you're in central office, going to a classroom that brings you joy. Go into a room. Every building has a class that brings someone's joy. If you're in central office, you should have spent time in schools, so you should also know rooms that bring you joy. But going into that room will help to center you back to your North Star, which is serving students. An example is back when I was here in Indianapolis, there was a pre-K center. Do you remember the pre-K center? I would love to go because when you see those, I think they were maybe 3 and 4 year olds there, then maybe some five. But that brought me such joy, their enthusiasm for school. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is why we're here. It's because we want them to be very successful. And they're so kind and they're so loving at 3 and 4 year olds. So I would say initially put yourself in the space that reminds you about why you're in the work. Just go sit in that classroom, no matter the classroom. I was a high school teacher. We had a self-contained, it was occupational course of study class, and I would love to go to that classroom, and that would bring me joy, and it would recenter me. But then, and after then create some routines that also bring you stability and center yourself daily. With your morning routine, for me, it's getting up, it's working out, it's having devotion, and then having a great breakfast and starting my day. In the evening, I end it with devotion. I do some things to wind down, spend time with my husband, and then I'm going to sleep. So I would say bookend your day every day with something that grounds you and brings you joy. And then things are clearer. Once you're back being centered, then things are clearer for you to decide what do you do next. But sometimes you need that hard reset, and going back to a classroom that you love is a great reset, or a pre-K building.
I've got one more for you. To that central office leader who doesn't know that they may not be supporting their leaders, know how to support their leaders. Can you speak to them about things that maybe they should be thinking about as we move into this space? Anxiety is high for everybody. Testing is an indicator of success. We've leaned into that. Um, what would you encourage them to do for their leaders in the next month or two?
I think that for central office, it's always great to ask principals what support is supportive to you. And so they might say something flippant like, stay out of my building. Thank you for that. I'm not going to stay out. So if I come in your building, what would be supportive if I come in your building? Or what things can I do to help you achieve XYZ? Because goals are so clear nowadays. And so if your graduation rate or whatever those goals are, your literacy rate for I read, what can I do to support you with that? And to be honest and open, I am going to come in your building because, of course, what gets monitored gets done. The same thing for you as a principal. But I'd be open to having conversation. Say, so what does support look like to you? Like the principal I mentioned, he had these 4 outside supporters, and none of it was supportive. And I don't know if anyone ever asked him, so what support do you need? What does support look like? but having that conversation. And even if they do come back with a flippant answer, stay out, I don't need you, that's not going to happen. But what would be helpful in addition to me coming to visit you?
You are amazing. Um, gems, joy. I got my gems. I was able to get my gems. Um, share with my family ways that they can contact you. Wonderful things that you enjoy doing right now for supporting leaders in central office. All the things.
So I've tried to create with Joyful Excellence a large menu of things that are free. We have cocktails and gems. I know you'd love to come, but cocktails and gems just for Black women. But you can visit. And so folks who follow me on LinkedIn get to see everything I do. So Cocktails and Gems is every month and it's free. Actually, it's next Wednesday. We have Aisha Crumbine, who actually is a life coach, and she lives in Portugal. She's dynamic. She'll be there on Wednesday. And so also just being on my email list, every Monday I send out Monday Leadership Reset, just something that's just tangible for you to try differently that week. I have monthly workshops and also monthly webinars.
Give us your contact information.
So on LinkedIn, I'm Wanda Legrand, and my company is Joyful Excellence Education Group.
I appreciate you. I do. Family, go check her out, please. I've been able to see her work up close. And my hope is that your heart is joyful, that there was a leader, a central office leader, who is reminded of how to go find that joy, your North Star. As Dr. LeGrand framed it, I loved it. I'm going to go look for my North Star right now as a reminder. If you are visiting us and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. My hope and goal is to bring more excellent humans to share their journeys and their gifts with the world. Thank you for hanging out. We'll see you next time.